I should have let him die in that storm. Clara Whitmore never imagined those words would haunt her as she stood in a crowded Texas courthouse, watching the drifter she saved reveal himself as one of the wealthiest men in the state, right before he destroyed the corrupt land grab that nearly stole her ranch. But his deception cut deeper than any betrayal she'd known. The stranger who mended her fences had been testing her heart all along, and now the entire town knew she'd been played for a fool. But here's where the real story begins. Because what happened next changed everything. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick with me until the end. You won't believe how this turns out. The prairie had been burning under drought for 6 weeks straight when the storm finally rolled in. Clara Whitmore stood on her porch that August evening in 1883, watching the horizon turn the color of a fresh bruise. She was 52 years old, rail-thin from skipping meals to stretch her dwindling supplies. And she'd learned not to trust anything, especially not weather that looked too good to be true. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain across the dead grass. Her chickens scattered toward the coop, sensing what was coming. Clara gripped the porch railing, wood rough against her calloused palms, and counted the seconds between lightning and thunder. 3 miles out. Maybe less. She should have gone inside, but something kept her rooted there. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the bone-deep exhaustion of fighting alone for so long that she'd forgotten how to be cautious. Her late husband Thomas used to joke that she had more guts than sense. He'd been dead 4 years now, and she still heard his voice sometimes when the wind blew just right. "Get inside, Clara," she muttered to herself. "Storm's gonna hit hard." But she didn't move. That's when she saw him. At first he was just a dark shape staggering across the prairie, barely visible in the failing light. Clara's hand instinctively moved to the rifle she kept by the door. Out here, strangers meant trouble more often than not. She'd turned away 3 drifters this summer alone, men with hungry eyes and hands that twitched toward their gun belts when they thought she wasn't looking. This one moved different, though. Unsteady. Wrong. He was still a quarter-mile out when the first fat raindrops hit, spattering the dust like bullets. The figure stumbled, caught himself, kept coming. Lightning cracked across the sky, close enough now that the thunder came almost instantly, and in that brief flash of white light Clara saw him clearly. Blood on his sleeve, mud caked up to his knees, face she didn't recognize. "Hell," she whispered. The storm opened up all at once, the way summer storms did in Texas. 0 to biblical in 30 seconds. Rain hammered down so hard it bounced off the dirt, turning everything into a gray wall of water. The stranger disappeared into it, but Clara knew he was still coming. She could feel it somehow, the way animals sense earthquakes before they hit. She grabbed her rifle and stepped back inside, leaving the door cracked just enough to see through. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was stupid. She should bar the door, load both barrels, wait it out. The prairie had taught her that much at least. But the rain was vicious, the kind that killed cattle if they got caught in the open too long. And despite everything, despite 4 years of learning the hard way that kindness got you robbed or worse, Clara couldn't quite make herself lock him out. Not yet. The knock came 5 minutes later, barely audible over the roar of rain on the tin roof. Clara stood in her kitchen, rifle leveled at the door, finger near the trigger. "State your business." No answer. Just another knock, weaker this time. "I said state your business or move along." A man's voice, rough and exhausted. "Ma'am, I don't mean any trouble. Just need to get out of this storm before it kills me. There's a barn half a mile south. You passed it." "Barn's got a caved-in roof. Saw it on my way up." A pause. "Please, ma'am, I can sleep on your porch. Won't even ask to come inside." Clara's jaw clenched. She'd heard pretty words before. Desperate men said whatever they thought you wanted to hear, right up until they had their hands around your throat. But something in his voice didn't sound like the others. He wasn't pleading, wasn't trying to charm her. He sounded like a man who'd already accepted he might die tonight and was just asking for one small mercy on the way out. "You armed?" she called. "Yes, ma'am." At least he was honest about that. "Toss your weapons off the porch. Do it now." She heard the clatter of metal on wood. A gun belt by the sound of it, maybe a knife. Could be more hidden, but it was something. Clara moved to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. He stood with his back to the door, hands visible, head bowed against the downpour. Lightning flickered again and she got a better look. Tall, maybe 40-something, dark hair plastered to his skull. He wasn't reaching for anything, wasn't even looking at the house, just standing there, getting beaten by the rain. Porch only, Clara said, lowering the rifle slightly. You try the door, I'll shoot you through it. Understand? Yes, ma'am. Thank you. She heard him settle down on the far end of the porch, away from the door. Smart. The roof there leaked like a sieve, but it was better than nothing. Clara stood in her kitchen for a long time after that, listening to the storm rage and wondering what the hell she'd just done. Chapter 2. The long night sleep didn't come. Clara sat in her rocking chair with the rifle across her lap, watching the door and listening to the storm try to tear her cabin apart. The wind screamed through gaps in the walls she hadn't gotten around to sealing, and rain drummed on the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. Every creak made her tense. Every shift of weight on the porch boards outside made her finger tighten on the trigger. But the stranger didn't try the door, didn't call out, didn't do anything except sit there in the dark and the wet, quiet, as a ghost. Around midnight, Clara got up and made coffee. She didn't know why. Habit, maybe. Thomas used to say her coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and she'd gotten so used to making a full pot for two that she still did it sometimes, even though there was only her now. The smell filled the small cabin, chicory and burned grounds, bitter and familiar. Clara poured herself a cup and sat back down, cradling the warmth between her palms. Through the window, she could just barely make out the stranger's silhouette. He sat with his back against the cabin wall, knees drawn up, head tilted back like he was studying the storm. What kind of man sat calm as Sunday morning in weather that could kill him? Clara's curiosity gnawed at her, worse than hunger. She'd spent 4 years avoiding people, keeping her head down, speaking only when necessary at the general store. Safety meant isolation, but isolation also meant she'd forgotten what it felt like to wonder about another human being. The coffee grew cold in her hands. Outside, the storm began to ease around 2 in the morning. The rain thinned to a steady patter, and the thunder rumbled off toward the east. Clara's eyes burned with exhaustion, but she didn't dare sleep. Not with a stranger 10 feet away, armed or not. Dawn came slow and gray, creeping across the prairie like something ashamed of itself. Clara finally stood, joints protesting, and moved to the window. The stranger was still there, but he'd shifted position. Now he sat facing the prairie, watching the sun struggle to break through the cloud cover. And he was working on something. Clara's breath caught. She grabbed the rifle and moved to the door, easing it open just enough to see. The stranger had her gate. The damn thing had been hanging off one hinge for 8 months, ever since the latch broke during a windstorm, and she'd lacked the strength to fix it properly. She'd been meaning to get to it, had put it on the list right below repair the chicken coop and patch the roof, and about 40 other things she couldn't manage alone. But this stranger, this man she'd almost left to die, had somehow found tools in her shed and was reattaching the hinge with hands that moved quick and sure despite the rain and the dark. Clara stood in the doorway, rifle lowered, and watched him work. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her at all. Just bent over that gate like it was the most important thing in the world, measuring twice and fitting the pieces together with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "What the hell are you doing?" Clara finally said. He didn't startle, just finished tightening a screw before he answered. "Gate was broken. Figured I'd fix it." "I didn't ask you to fix anything." "No, ma'am." "You didn't." He tested the hinge, nodded to himself, and stood up slowly. His shirt was still damp, and in the gray morning light, Clara could see he was older than she'd thought, maybe closer to her age, lines around his eyes, silver threading through his dark hair, the kind of weathering that came from years in the sun, not just miles on the road. "You had no right touching my property," Clara said, but the anger in her voice sounded hollow even to her. The stranger met her eyes for the first time. His were gray, she noticed, storm-colored, and tired, the bone-deep kind of tired that sleep couldn't fix. "You're right," he said quietly. "I apologize. Won't happen again." He moved to collect his gun belt from where he'd tossed it the night before, wincing slightly as he bent. That's when Clara saw the blood on his sleeve wasn't just mud. It had soaked through the fabric, dark and fresh. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "Doesn't look like nothing." He straightened, gun belt in hand, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she'd noticed or cared. Just a scrape, I've had worse. Clara believed that. She could see it in the way he carried himself, all careful movements and controlled pain. This was a man who'd learned to hurt quietly. There's coffee inside, she heard herself say. Still hot, and I've got bandages. He stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Well, Clara demanded, you coming in or not? I'm not heating that coffee twice. The stranger's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Chapter 3. Coffee and Careful Words. Clara's kitchen was small and sparse, just a cast-iron stove, a rough-hewn table, and 2 chairs that had seen better days. Thomas had built the table when they first married, back when they'd had dreams of filling the house with children and noise. Now it was just her, and for the moment, a stranger bleeding on her floor. Sit, Clara said, pointing to one of the chairs. She moved to the stove and poured coffee into a tin cup, then set it in front of him harder than necessary. Coffee sloshed over the rim. The stranger didn't complain, just wrapped his hands around the cup and breathed in the steam like it was something holy. Clara pulled out her medical kit, barely more than some clean rags, a bottle of whiskey, and a needle and thread she'd used more times than she wanted to remember. Living alone meant learning to stitch yourself up when things went wrong. Take off your shirt, she said. He hesitated. I've seen a man's chest before. Had a husband for 28 years. You're not showing me anything I haven't seen. That got him moving. He unbuttoned his shirt slowly, peeling the wet fabric away from his skin. The injury was on his upper arm, a deep gash, maybe 4 inches long, still seeping blood. Not a knife wound. Too ragged for that. Barbed wire? Clara guessed. Yes, ma'am. Caught it climbing a fence in the dark. Stupid thing to do. Yes, ma'am. Clara soaked a rag in whiskey and pressed it to the wound without warning. The stranger hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. This needs stitches, Clara said, examining it closer. It's deep. I know. You got anyone who can do it proper? Town doctor's 3 hours south. Can't go to town. He said it flat, matter of fact, not hiding anything but not explaining either. Clara studied his face. He met her eyes steady, no guilt there that she could see, but no defiance either, just acceptance. You running from something? She asked. Not anymore. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got, ma'am. Clara should have thrown him out right then. Should have told him to take his mysteries and his trouble and get off her land before the sun climbed any higher. But instead she threaded her needle and bent over his arm, fingers steady, despite everything. Hold still. This is gonna hurt. I know. She worked in silence, pushing the needle through skin and pulling it tight, over and over, until the wound was closed. The stranger didn't make a sound, didn't flinch, just stared at the wall and let her work, which somehow made it worse. When Clara finished, she wrapped his arm in clean bandages and stepped back. There. Don't get it wet and change the dressing daily. You'll live. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided what to do with you. The stranger looked at her then, really looked, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Why'd you let me in? Claire didn't have a good answer. So Storm would have killed you. You didn't know that when you opened the door. No, I didn't. So why? Clara poured herself more coffee, buying time. Why had she? 4 years of keeping everyone at arm's length, and she'd broken that rule for a man whose name she didn't even know. Guess I'm stupid, she finally said. No, ma'am, I don't think that's it. Then what? The stranger was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. I think you're tired of being alone. Same as me. The words hit Clara like a punch to the chest. She turned away, busying herself with the coffee pot so he wouldn't see her face. You got a name, stranger? Wade. Wade Mercer. Well, Wade Mercer, I'm Clara Whitmore. This is my land, has been for 30 years. My husband and I built this ranch from nothing, and when he died, I kept it running by myself. She turned back to face him. I'm telling you this so you understand. I didn't survive this long by being soft or stupid. You try anything, I will put you down. Clear? Yes, ma'am. Good. Now finish your coffee and get out. Wade stood, moving carefully, and pulled his damp shirt back on. He left the coffee untouched on the table. At the door, he paused. The gate's fixed, and I noticed your woodpile's low. If you've got an axe, I could. I said get out. He nodded once and stepped outside. Clara watched through the window as he walked toward the prairie, moving slow but steady. His gun belt was back on his hip, and he didn't look back. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to regret. Chapter 4. The Second Chance. Wade made it about 100 yards before Clara called after him. Wait! He stopped but didn't turn around. Clara stood on her porch, arms crossed, scowling at her own weakness. The words came out before she could stop them. Creek's flooded from the storm. You try to cross it now, you'll drown for sure. It was a lie. The creek ran shallow even in heavy rain, and they both probably knew it. Wade turned slowly. How long until it's safe? Day or two, maybe 3. Clara jerked her head toward the barn. You can sleep out there. Stay out of my way. Don't touch anything else without asking, and maybe I won't shoot you. What's the catch? Catch? Why are you doing this? Clara's jaw tightened. Good question. She didn't have a good answer. You fixed my gate. Figure I owe you a dry place to sleep. That gate took me 20 minutes. Then consider yourself overpaid. You staying or not? Wade studied her for a long moment, and Clara had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her, past the tough words and the rifle and the 4 years of armor she'd built up. See straight through to the lonely woman underneath who was so desperate for another human voice she'd make up lies about flooded creeks. Yes, ma'am, he finally said. I'm staying, thank you. Don't thank me, just stay out of trouble. He nodded and headed toward the barn. Clara watched him go, then went inside and shut the door harder than necessary. What the hell was she doing? The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of an axe biting into wood. She sat up fast, heart hammering, and grabbed the rifle before her brain even fully woke up. Sunlight streamed through the window. She'd overslept, which never happened. The clock on the mantel read past 7. The axe sound came again, steady, rhythmic. Clara pulled on her boots and went outside, rifle in hand. Wade stood by the woodpile, or what had been the woodpile. Now it was twice as high, fresh split logs stacked neat and tight. He'd found her axe in the shed and was working through a dead cottonwood she'd been meaning to clear for months. He saw her coming and stopped, axe lowered. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the early hour. Told you not to touch anything without asking, Clara said. You did. So why are you chopping my wood? Wade leaned on the axe handle. Because you need it. Winter's coming, and you don't have near enough to get through. That's not your concern. Maybe not, but I'm here, and I can help, so I am. Clara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. When was the last time someone had just helped without wanting something in return? She couldn't remember. You have breakfast yet? She asked instead. Wade blinked. No, ma'am. I've got eggs and some bacon that's probably still good. You can eat after you finish that wood. She turned and walked back to the house before he could respond, cheeks burning for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. Inside, Clara made breakfast with shaking hands. This was dangerous. She knew it was dangerous. Letting Wade stay was one thing. Letting herself get used to having him around was something else entirely. But when he came in 20 minutes later, wood all chopped and stacked, and sat at her table with his hat in his hands and said, "That smells real good, ma'am." Clara found she didn't care about danger quite as much as she should. They ate in silence. Wade cleaned his plate and thanked her 3 times. Then he stood to leave. Fences need mending, Clara heard herself say. West pasture. Wire's been down since spring. Wade paused. You offering me work? I'm saying if you're staying a few days anyway, might as well make yourself useful. I'll feed you, that's all. That's more than fair. Don't make me regret this, Wade Mercer. His mouth twitched again, that almost smile. No, ma'am. I won't. Chapter 5. Building Something Unnamed. 3 days turned into a week. Wade fixed the west fence, then the north. He patched the barn roof, replaced 2 rotted porch boards, and somehow got Clara's stubborn well pump working again after she'd spent 6 months hauling water from the creek. He worked from sunrise to sunset without complaining, and at night they sat on the porch in careful silence, listening to the prairie settle down around them. Clara told herself it was practical. She needed the help, and Wade needed a place to stay. Simple transaction, but it didn't feel simple. "Where are you from?" she asked one evening after they'd fallen into the habit of sharing coffee while the sun went down. Wade was quiet for a long time. "All over. Grew up on a ranch in South Texas. Moved around after that." "Family?" "Not anymore." Clara heard the weight in those words. She knew that weight, carried it herself. "I lost my husband 4 years ago," she said. "Fever took him in 3 days. Didn't even have time to say goodbye proper." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Clara stared out at the darkening prairie. "We were going to do so much. Build this place into something real. Have kids, maybe grandkids. Grow old together." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "Funny how life works out." "Yeah," Wade said softly. "It is." "What about you? You got people somewhere missing you?" "No, ma'am. I made sure of that." Clara turned to look at him. "What's that mean?" Wade's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too tough to swallow. Finally, "I trusted the wrong people once. Cost me everything that mattered. After that, I figured it was easier to just keep moving. Can't lose people if you don't let anyone close." "That's a lonely way to live." "Yes, ma'am. It is." They sat in silence after that, but it felt different somehow, like something had shifted between them. Two people who'd both learned the hard way that caring about others meant giving them the power to destroy you. "I laughed today," Clara said suddenly. Wade looked at her, surprised. "Ma'am?" "When you were trying to catch that rooster, and he got away. I laughed." She shook her head. "First time in, I don't even know how long. Felt strange." "Strange bad?" "Strange good." Wade smiled then. A real smile, not just that twitch at the corner of his mouth. It changed his whole face, made him look younger. "Good." That night, Clara lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the familiar creaks of the old house. Something was happening, something she hadn't planned for and didn't know how to handle. She was starting to care about Wade Mercer, and that terrified her more than any storm. Chapter 6. When Trouble Comes Calling. The peace lasted exactly 13 days. Clara was in the garden when she heard horses coming up the road. Multiple horses, moving fast. Her stomach clenched. Nobody came out here unless they wanted something, and what they wanted was usually bad news. She grabbed the rifle from where she kept it by the porch and called for Wade. He appeared from the barn, tools in hand, and his whole body went tense when he saw the dust cloud approaching. "You expecting company?" he asked. "Never." 5 riders crested the hill. Clara recognized the man in front immediately. Horace Grady, the land speculator who'd been circling her property like a vulture for the past 2 years. Behind him rode Sheriff Coleman and 3 men Clara didn't know, all of them armed. This was bad. Grady pulled his horse up in front of the porch and smiled down at Clara with too many teeth. "Mrs. Whitmore, looking lovely as always. State your business, Grady, then get off my land." Now, is that any way to greet an old friend? "We're not friends." "No, I suppose we're not." Grady's smile didn't waver. "I'm here on county business, I'm afraid. Official business." Sheriff Coleman shifted in his saddle, looking uncomfortable. He was a weak man who'd sold his badge to Grady years ago, and everyone knew it. "What kind of business?" Clara demanded. Grady pulled a paper from his coat and made a show of unfolding it. "Seems you owe the county quite a bit in back taxes, Mrs. Whitmore. Taxes that are, as of today, officially delinquent." Clara's blood went cold. "That's a lie. I paid my taxes." "Did you now?" "Funny, because the county ledger shows otherwise." Grady's voice dripped false sympathy. "These things happen, of course. A woman alone, struggling to manage finances. No shame in it." "Let me see that paper." Grady handed it down. Clara snatched it and read fast, her hand shaking with rage. The numbers couldn't be right. They showed she owed over $3,000 in back taxes and fees, an impossible sum. "This is fraud," she said. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Whitmore." "It's the truth." "Then I'm sure you have receipts proving you paid?" Grady raised an eyebrow. "No?" "Well, then I'm afraid the law is quite clear. You have 30 days to pay the full amount, or your property will be auctioned to settle the debt." 30 days. Clara felt the world tilt under her feet. "However," Grady continued, "I'm not without mercy. I'm prepared to make you an offer right now. $500 for the property, cash money. You can take it and start fresh somewhere new. This land is worth 20 times that. On a good day, perhaps. But these aren't good days, are they? Grady gestured at the struggling ranch. Face facts, Mrs. Whitmore. You can't maintain this place alone. Better to sell now, while you still have the choice. Wade stepped forward then, and something in his movement made all 5 men reach for their guns. Easy, Wade said, hands visible. But his voice had changed. Gone was the quiet drifter. This was someone else entirely. Someone used to being obeyed. Mrs. Whitmore has 30 days. That means you have no legal standing to be here making offers. Grady's eyes narrowed. And who might you be? Someone who knows the law better than you do. A drifter playing lawyer. How amusing. Grady turned back to Clara. You have 30 days, Mrs. Whitmore. After that, your land goes to auction, and I promise you, I'll be the highest bidder. He tipped his hat. Good day. The 5 men turned and rode away, leaving Clara standing on her porch with a paper that might as well have been a death sentence. She didn't move until the dust settled. Then her legs gave out. Wade caught her before she hit the ground. I'm ruined, Clara whispered. I can't pay that, even if I sold everything, the chickens, the cattle, everything. I couldn't raise half that amount. Wade helped her to a chair. Let me see the paper. Clara handed it over with shaking hands. Wade studied it, his face darkening. This is a setup, he said finally. Look here. These fees didn't exist 6 months ago. Grady had someone add them to the county books, probably paid off the tax assessor. Doesn't matter. It's legal now. It's fraud. Fraud I can't prove. Clara put her head in her hands. I'm going to lose everything. 30 years of work, gone. Wade knelt in front of her. Clara, look at me. She lifted her head. You're not fighting this alone, Wade said. I won't let that happen. You can't stop it. Nobody can. Maybe not, but I can try. His gray eyes held hers, fierce and determined. I told you once. I trusted the wrong people, and it cost me everything. I won't make that mistake again. You helped me when you had every reason not to. Now let me help you. How? You got $3,000 hiding somewhere? Wade's expression flickered, something Clara couldn't read. No, but I've got time, and I've got a working brain, and I've got a reason to fight now. He squeezed her hand. We'll figure this out. Together. Clara wanted to believe him, but hope was dangerous, and she'd stopped believing in miracles a long time ago. Still, when Wade pulled her to her feet and said, Come on, we've got work to do, she followed. Because what else was there? The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when Wade started going through every piece of paper Clara owned. He'd moved the kitchen table near the window for better light and spread out 20 years of receipts, ledgers, and correspondence like he was building a map to buried treasure. Clara watched from the stove, coffee pot in hand, trying not to think about how natural it felt having someone else in her kitchen at dawn. Found something? She asked. Wade didn't look up. Maybe. You kept copies of your tax payments? Some of them. Thomas always said to keep records. Clara poured 2 cups and set one by Wade's elbow. A lot of good it's doing me now. Every bit helps. Wade picked up the coffee without breaking his concentration, took a sip, and immediately started coughing. Jesus, Clara, what did you put in this? Chicory, same as always. You could strip paint with this. You complaining? No, ma'am. But he pushed the cup away slightly, which made Clara smile despite everything. They worked in silence for the next hour, Wade reading, making notes in the margins of Grady's fraudulent tax bill. Clara tried to keep busy with morning chores, but her mind kept circling back to the same impossible math. $3,000. Might as well be $3 million. This fee here, Wade said suddenly, pointing, assessment adjustment charge. You ever pay anything called that before? Clara came to look over his shoulder. Never heard of it. That's because it doesn't exist. Or it didn't, until someone invented it specifically for you. Wade's jaw tightened. They're not even trying to hide it. Look, every other property in the county shows standard tax rates. Only yours has these additional charges. Can we prove that? We'd need to see the county ledger, the real one, not whatever doctored version they're keeping in the courthouse. And how do we get that? Wade leaned back in his chair, thinking. We'd need someone on the inside. Someone who has access to the records and a reason to help. Nobody in that town's going to help me. They all know Grady owns the sheriff and half the county commissioners. Anyone who crosses him ends up ruined. Not everyone. There's got to be someone with a conscience. Clara laughed bitterly. You've been living under a rock? Conscience doesn't buy food or keep the bank from foreclosing. People look out for themselves. That's just how it is. Wade studied her face. That's not what you did when you let me stay. That was different. How? It just was. Clara turned away, uncomfortable with wherever this conversation was heading. Anyway, even if we found someone willing to help, what then? We expose Grady's scheme and he just pays off a judge, maybe gets a slap on the wrist. Meanwhile, I still can't pay $3,000 I don't have. So we find the money. From where? You got a rich uncle somewhere? Wade's expression flickered again. That same unreadable look from yesterday. But before Clara could push, he stood up and started gathering the papers into neat stacks. I'm going to town, he said. The hell you are. Grady's got eyes everywhere. He sees you asking questions, he'll know we're planning something. Then I won't ask questions. I'll just look around, see what I can see. Wade grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. You got a list of supplies you need? Clara wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him this was a waste of time and he should just saddle up and ride away before Grady's mess swallowed him too. But the stubborn set of Wade's shoulders told her she'd be talking to a wall. Flour if they have it, salt, coffee that doesn't taste like dirt apparently. Wade's mouth twitched. I'll see what I can do. He was gone before Clara could say anything else. The morning dragged. Clara tried to work, fed the chickens, checked the fence lines, hauled water even though Wade had fixed the pump. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind from spinning through every disaster scenario. Wade had been gone 3 hours when she heard a horse coming up fast. Clara's heart jumped. Too soon for Wade to be back. She grabbed the rifle and positioned herself on the porch, squinting against the midday glare. The rider wasn't wearing Grady's colors. As he got closer, Clara recognized him, Billy Chen, who worked at the general store. Young kid, maybe 19, with a nervous way of talking that made him seem even younger. He pulled up in a cloud of dust, breathing hard. Mrs. Whitmore. Billy, what's wrong? It's your friend, the one who came to town. He's in trouble. Claire's stomach dropped. What kind of trouble? He got into it with some of Grady's men at the saloon. They're saying he started a fight, but that's not how it looked to me. They cornered him, and he was just defending himself. But now Sheriff Coleman's threatening to lock him up for disturbing the peace. Damn it! Clara was already moving toward the barn. Where is he now? Still at the saloon. Sheriff's waiting for Grady to show up and decide what to do with him. Billy shifted in his saddle. Mrs. Whitmore, I probably shouldn't be here. If Grady finds out I warned you. I know. Thank you, Billy. My mom always said your husband was a good man. Fair. That matters for something. The kid looked embarrassed. Anyway, I should go. He rode off before Clara could respond. She saddled her horse in record time, rifle secured, and headed for town at a pace that would probably lame the animal. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting to Wade before Grady turned this into something worse. The ride took 45 minutes that felt like hours. By the time Clara reached the edge of town, her hands were shaking with a mix of fear and rage. She should have known better than to let Wade go alone. Should have known Grady would be watching. The main street was quiet, too quiet for midday. Clara noticed curtains twitching in windows as she passed. Word had spread fast. She found the situation exactly how Billy described. Wade sat on a bench outside the saloon, hands behind his back like he'd been cuffed. 3 of Grady's men stood nearby, trying to look casual but watching Wade like hawks. Sheriff Coleman leaned against a post, picking his teeth, and Horace Grady stood in the middle of the street smiling. Clara dismounted and walked straight toward them, rifle visible across her saddle. Every eye turned to her. Mrs. Whitmore, Grady said. What a pleasant surprise. Cut the bullshit, Grady. What's the charge? Your friend here assaulted 3 men in broad daylight. Several witnesses. I'm sure there are. Clara looked at the 3 men nursing bruises. Funny how your witnesses all work for you. The law is the law. The law? Clara turned to Sheriff Coleman. You gonna tell me what really happened, or are you too busy licking Grady's boots? Coleman's face went red. Watch your mouth, woman. Or what? You'll arrest me too? Clara walked past him to where Wade sat. His face was bloodied, but his eyes were calm. Too calm. "You all right? Been better?" "What happened?" "I was asking about land sales. Who's been buying, who's been selling. They didn't like my questions." Grady stepped closer. "See, that's the problem. Your friend here has been poking his nose where it doesn't belong, making accusations, spreading lies about upstanding citizens. Asking questions isn't illegal." "No, but assault is." Clara looked at Wade's cuffed hands, at the three men who probably jumped him the second he mentioned Grady's name, and felt something cold settle in her chest. "How much?" she asked. Grady raised an eyebrow. "Pardon? How much to make this go away? That's how this works, isn't it? You manufacture a crime, then offer to drop charges for the right price." "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm shocked you'd suggest such a thing." "Name your price." Grady's smile widened. "I don't want your money, Clara. I want your land. Sign it over to me right now, and your friend walks free. Simple as that." The street went dead silent. Clara felt every eye on her, felt the weight of 30 years pressing down. Thomas's voice in her head, the dreams they'd built together, every fence post and water well and moment of backbreaking work. "No," she said. Wade's head snapped up. "Clara, shut up." She turned back to Grady. "You want my land? You'll have to steal it legal, at the auction, with witnesses and proper paperwork. I won't make it easy for you." Grady's smile faded. "You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make." "Sheriff," Grady said softly, "arrest her too. Conspiracy to commit assault." Coleman moved forward, hand on his pistol. Wade surged to his feet, cuffs and all, putting himself between Clara and the sheriff. "Don't." Wade's voice was quiet, but it carried. "You arrest her. You'll have to go through me. You're already in irons, friend. Doesn't mean I can't make your day a whole lot worse." The standoff stretched. Clara could feel the tension winding tighter, like a rope about to snap. Someone was going to do something stupid, and then this whole thing would spiral beyond control. Then a new voice cut through the silence. "Sheriff Coleman, stand down!" Everyone turned. A man in an expensive suit stood at the edge of the gathering crowd. Clara didn't recognize him, middle-aged, graying at the temples, with the kind of presence that said he was used to being listened to. He carried a leather satchel and had the look of someone who'd just stepped off a train. "And who the hell are you?" Grady demanded. "Robert Hayes, attorney at law, representing Mrs. Clara Whitmore in all matters pertaining to her property and person." He walked forward and handed papers to Sheriff Coleman. "That's an injunction preventing any legal action against Mrs. Whitmore or her associates pending a full investigation into irregularities in county tax assessments, signed by Judge Morrison this morning." Coleman read the papers, his face going pale. "Judge Morrison? District Court, outranks county by quite a bit." Hayes turned to Grady. "I've also filed complaints with the State Land Office regarding suspicious fee structures appearing in local tax records. They'll be sending auditors next week." Grady's face had gone purple. "You can't." "I can, and I have. Now, unless you want to add obstruction of justice to your growing list of problems, I suggest you tell the sheriff to release Mr. Mercer immediately." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Grady jerked his head at Coleman. "Let him go." The sheriff fumbled with keys and unlocked Wade's cuffs. Wade rubbed his wrists but kept his eyes on Grady. "This isn't over," Grady said. "No," Hayes agreed. "It's not. But the next round will be fought in a courtroom, with proper oversight. I suspect you'll find that a much less comfortable battlefield." Grady stormed off, his men trailing behind. The crowd began to disperse, whispering. Clara stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Hayes turned to her. "Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private." "Who are you?" Clara demanded. "I didn't hire any lawyer." "No, but someone who cares about you did." Clara looked at Wade. He met her eyes but said nothing. They ended up in the back room of the general store, Billy's mother having offered them privacy and weak tea. Wade stood by the window, watching the street. Clara sat across from Hayes, feeling like she'd walked into someone else's story. "All right," she said. "Start talking." Hayes pulled documents from his satchel. 3 days ago, I received a telegram from Mr. Mercer here, along with a substantial retainer and instructions to investigate irregularities in county tax records pertaining to your property. I've spent the past 72 hours reviewing documents, interviewing county employees, and compiling evidence. Evidence of what? Fraud. Systematic and deliberate. Hayes spread papers across the table. Horace Grady has been manipulating tax assessments for the past 2 years, targeting properties he wants to acquire. He bribes assessors to add fraudulent fees, then purchases the land at auction for a fraction of its value. You're the 7th victim. Claire's hands clenched. Can you prove it? I have testimony from a county clerk who kept duplicates of the original records. Grady didn't know she was documenting everything. Hayes tapped one of the documents. With this evidence, we can not only clear your tax debt, but potentially have Grady arrested for fraud and bribery. It was too much, too good. Clara looked at Wade. How did you pay for this? Wade turned from the window. That's not important. The hell it's not. Lawyers like this don't work for free. I had some money saved. How much? Clara, how much, Wade? He was quiet for a long moment. Enough. Hayes cleared his throat. If I may, Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Mercer's financial situation isn't relevant to your case. What matters is that we now have the leverage to save your property and potentially remove a corrupt element from your community. Everything's relevant when someone's lying to you. Clara stood up, chair scraping loud against the floor. I need air. She walked out before anyone could stop her. The street outside was bright and hot, normal life resuming now that the excitement was over. Clara leaned against the storefront, trying to sort through the mess in her head. Wade followed her out. Of course he did. Don't, Clara said before he could speak. Don't you dare try to explain this away. I wasn't going to. Good. Because I'm not an idiot, Wade. Lawyers like Hayes cost more money than I'll see in my lifetime. You're either rich, which means you've been lying about being a drifter, or you did something illegal to get that money, which means you've dragged me into something worse than Grady's schemes. Wade leaned against the building beside her, close but not touching. I'm not a criminal. Then what are you? Complicated. Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give right now. Why? What are you so afraid of? Wade turned to look at her, and the raw honesty in his face made Clara's breath catch. I'm afraid you'll look at me different, treat me different, send me away. So instead you lie. I never lied. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same damn thing. Maybe, Wade's voice dropped. But I had my reasons, which you won't share. Not yet. Clara wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the righteous fury that felt safer than the confusion churning underneath. But she kept thinking about Wade sitting in those cuffs, ready to fight despite the odds. Kept thinking about him spending a fortune, however he got it, to save her ranch without asking for anything in return. The auction's in 3 weeks, she said finally. I know. Hayes can delay it? You think so? And the evidence? It's solid? As solid as it gets. Clara closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm on her face. I don't like being protected. I know that too. And I don't like secrets. Fair enough. But I hate Grady more than I hate either of those things. Clara opened her eyes and looked at Wade. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to work with your lawyer. We're going to fight this thing properly. And when it's done, when my land is safe and Grady's in a cell, you're going to tell me the whole truth, all of it. Wade nodded slowly. Deal. I'm not finished. If I find out you're using me for something, if this is all some scheme I don't understand, I will put a bullet in you myself. Clear? Crystal. Good. Clara pushed off from the wall. Now let's go hear what Hayes has planned. They walked back inside together. Hayes had organized his papers into neat stacks, each labeled with dates and names. He looked up when they entered. We ready to discuss strategy? Clara sat down and folded her hands on the table. Talk. Over the next hour, Hayes laid out a plan that was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. They'd file for an emergency injunction to halt the auction while the investigation proceeded. Simultaneously, Hayes would present evidence to the district attorney, pushing for criminal charges against Grady and anyone involved in the fraud. It's risky, Hayes admitted. Grady has friends in high places. He'll fight back hard. Let him, Claire said. There's another complication. The other victims, the properties Grady already acquired through fraudulent auctions. If we prove the scheme, those sales become void. The original owners could reclaim their land. That's good, isn't it? Yes and no. It means dozens of legal battles, people fighting to get back what they lost. The county will be tied up in litigation for years. Some folks won't thank you for opening that door. Clara thought about the neighbors who'd watched her struggle and said nothing, who'd looked the other way while Grady stole from a widow. Don't care, she said. If I'm going down, I'm taking the whole rotten system with me. Hayes smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. They worked until the sun started setting, going over documents and affidavits and legal terminology that made Clara's head spin. Wade stayed quiet mostly, watching and listening. When they finally finished, Hayes packed up his satchel and stood. I'll file the injunction first thing tomorrow. Expect Grady to retaliate. He's going to make your life difficult. More difficult than it already is? Substantially. Hayes looked between Clara and Wade. Watch yourselves. Men like Grady don't like losing, and they don't fight fair. After Hayes left, Clara and Wade rode back to the ranch in silence. The evening was cooling down, prairie wind carrying the smell of dust and distant rain. Clara's mind wouldn't stop churning through everything that had happened. Thank you, she said finally. Wade glanced at her. For what? For not running. When Grady had you arrested, you could have told him everything, saved yourself. Never crossed my mind. Why not? Wade was quiet for a long stretch, then, because I meant what I said. You're not fighting this alone anymore. Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest. Dangerous, complicated, but real. They reached the ranch as full dark settled in. Clara dismounted and started to unsaddle her horse, but Wade stopped her. I've got it. You go inside. You look exhausted. Clara wanted to argue on principle, but her body ached and her head throbbed. Fine. But don't forget to feed yours too. Yes, ma'am. Inside, Clara lit lamps and stared at her empty kitchen. The papers Wade had organized that morning were still spread across the table. Evidence of 30 years reduced to numbers and dates. She picked up one of the receipts, a payment for lumber from 15 years ago. Thomas's handwriting, careful and precise. They'd used that lumber to build the barn, working side by side through the summer heat. He'd been so careful about everything, always planning ahead, always protecting her. And now here she was, letting another man do the same thing. Clara set the receipt down and rubbed her eyes. She was tired of being protected, tired of being the one who needed saving. But she was also practical enough to know she couldn't fight Grady alone. Wade came in 20 minutes later, moving quiet like always. He saw her sitting in the dark and paused. You all right? Define all right. He crossed to the stove and started building a fire. Fair point. Wade. Yeah? When this is over, when we've beaten Grady and saved the ranch, what happens then? Wade's hand stilled. What do you mean? I mean, you came here running from something. Once you're not needed anymore, you'll run again, won't you? He didn't answer right away. Just stood there, firelight starting to flicker across his face, casting shadows that made him look both older and younger at the same time. I don't know, he finally said. It wasn't the answer Clara wanted, but it was honest. She could respect that. Well, she said, I guess we'll figure it out when we get there. Wade nodded and went back to building the fire. Clara watched him work, this stranger who'd stumbled into her life during a storm and somehow become the first person in 4 years she actually trusted. And she wondered, not for the first time, if that was the smartest thing she'd ever done or the stupidest. Probably both. The fire caught and warmth began to fill the small kitchen. Outside, night settled over the prairie like a blanket. Somewhere out there, Grady was plotting his next move. Hayes was filing papers. The whole county was holding its breath waiting to see what happened next. But inside Clara's kitchen, for just this moment, there was light and warmth and the quiet companionship of two people who'd both learned to survive alone. It wasn't much, but it was more than Clara had dared to hope for in a long time. And sometimes, she was learning, that was enough. Grady didn't waste time retaliating. 2 days after Hayes filed the injunction, Clara's water well stopped working. Not the pump, the well itself. Someone had dumped something down it overnight, contaminating the water so badly it came up brown and reeking. Wade discovered it at dawn when he went to fill the coffee pot. Clara heard him curse from inside the house and came running with her rifle, expecting to find Grady's men on the property. Instead, she found Wade staring down into the well, his face dark with anger. "What is it?" "See for yourself." Clara looked. The stench hit her first, something dead and rotting. The water that had been clear yesterday now looked like mud mixed with oil. "Someone poisoned it," Wade said quietly. "Probably dumped a carcass down there, maybe chemicals. We won't know until we drain the whole thing and clean it out. That'll take days." At least. Clara's hands clenched on the rifle. This was the kind of thing that broke people on the frontier. You could survive without a lot of things, but water wasn't one of them. The nearest creek was 2 miles away, and hauling water that distance for drinking, cooking, and livestock would eat up every hour of daylight. "We'll manage," she said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her. Wade turned to face her. "This is just the beginning. You know that, right? Grady's going to keep coming at us, keep finding ways to make life impossible until we give up." "Then we don't give up." "Clara, I said we don't give up." She met his eyes, stubborn and furious. "He wants me broken? Fine. Let him try. But I've survived 4 years alone on this ranch. I've buried a husband, lost most of my stock to drought, and kept going when everyone said I should sell. Horace Grady doesn't scare me." Wade studied her face for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. "No, I don't suppose he does." They spent the morning hauling water from the creek in barrels, back-breaking work that left Clara's shoulders screaming and her hands blistered. Wade worked without complaining, making 3 trips for every one of hers, but even he looked worn by noon. That's when the riders came. Clara saw the dust first, multiple horses coming fast from the direction of town. Her stomach clenched. She dropped the water barrel she'd been struggling with and grabbed the rifle from where she'd left it propped against the porch. Wade appeared from the barn, his own gun visible on his hip now. He'd stopped hiding it after the incident in town. "How many?" he asked. 4? Maybe 5. Grady's men? Probably. Wade positioned himself between Clara and the approaching riders. She almost snapped at him for it, but the cold calculation in his eyes stopped her. This wasn't him trying to protect some helpless woman. This was someone who'd been in situations like this before and knew how they usually ended. The riders crested the hill. Not Grady's men. Billy Chen rode in front with 3 others Clara vaguely recognized from town. Shopkeepers, farmers, people who'd never looked at her twice before. They pulled up in front of the house, horses blowing hard. "Mrs. Whitmore," Billy said. "We heard about your well." Clara kept the rifle ready. "Word travels fast. It does when Grady's boys are bragging about it in the saloon." One of the other men spoke up, Sam Porter, who ran the feed store. "They got drunk last night, talking about how they were going to make your life hell until you packed up and left." "That's real interesting, Sam, but I don't recall you offering to help when Grady showed up with that fake tax bill." Sam had the decency to look ashamed. "You're right. I didn't. None of us did. And that's on us." He gestured to the water barrels. "We'd like to make up for it now, if you'll let us." Clara's grip on the rifle didn't loosen. "Why? What's in it for you?" "Nothing," Billy said, "except maybe getting to look at ourselves in the mirror without feeling like cowards." The 4th rider, a woman Clara now recognized as Martha Hayes, no relation to the lawyer, leaned forward in her saddle. "My husband lost our farm to Grady 2 years ago. Couldn't pay the inflated taxes, got forced out at auction. We've been sharecropping ever since, working land that used to be ours." Her voice was tight with old anger. "I heard what your lawyer's doing. Heard he might be able to undo those fraudulent sales. If there's a chance we could get our land back, if there's even a small chance, then I want to help make sure you don't lose yours first." Clara looked at Wade. He gave a slight nod, but the decision was hers. "All right," she said finally. "You can help with the water, but I don't want charity. You work. I'll feed you. That's the deal." Sam smiled. "That's more than fair." They worked through the afternoon, 5 extra sets of hands making the impossible merely exhausting. Martha turned out to be stronger than she looked, hauling barrels that would have broken Clara's back. Billy organized everything with surprising efficiency, setting up a rotation so someone was always making the 2-mile trek to the creek. By evening, they had enough water stored to last a few days. Not a permanent solution, but it bought them time. Clara made dinner for everyone, stretched the food as far as it would go, which wasn't far. Beans and cornbread, coffee that made everyone wince but nobody complained about. They ate on the porch as the sun set, tired and dirty, and more comfortable than Clara had felt around other people in years. "So what's the plan?" Martha asked, mopping up bean juice with her cornbread. "Hayes got the injunction, but that just delays things. Grady's still got half the county officials in his pocket." "We need more evidence," Wade said. "Enough that even the district attorney can't ignore it." "You mean the district attorney Grady plays poker with every Thursday?" Sam shook his head. "Face it, this whole county's corrupt. Has been for years. It'd take someone with real power to clean it out." Clara saw Wade's jaw tighten. He stared out at the prairie, something working behind his eyes. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "Don't give me that. What are you thinking?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I might know someone. Someone with enough influence to push this investigation through, even with Grady's connections." "Who?" "It's complicated." Clara's patience snapped. "Everything with you is complicated, Wade. Give me a straight answer for once." The others had gone quiet, watching the exchange with uncomfortable interest. Wade stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "Before I came here, I worked in ranching, big operations. I knew people, influential people. If I reached out to them, they might be able to help." "Then do it." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because those people think I'm dead." The words hung in the air like smoke. Martha broke the silence. "I'm sorry, what?" Wade kept his back to them. "I had a partner, business partner. We built a cattle empire together, one of the biggest in Texas. But he got greedy, started cutting corners, mistreating workers. When I objected, he forced me out. Took everything, the company, the reputation, all of it. Then he spread lies, told everyone I'd embezzled money, betrayed our investors." Wade's voice went flat. "I couldn't fight him. He had too much power, too many connections. So I disappeared. Let everyone think Wade Mercer was either dead or long gone. Started over as nobody." Clara felt like she'd been punched. "What was your partner's name?" "Does it matter?" "It does to me." Wade finally turned to face her. "Harrison Blackwood. You heard of him?" Sam whistled low. "Blackwood Enterprises? Hell yes, we've heard of him. He owns half the railroads in the state." "Used to be our company," Wade said quietly. "Before he stole it." Clara tried to process this. The drifter who'd stumbled onto her porch during a storm wasn't just some wandering laborer. He was, or had been, someone powerful enough to make Grady look like a small-time crook. "So what changed?" she demanded. "Why'd you tell me now?" "Because you deserve to know. And because if we're going to beat Grady, we need help from people who can actually make a difference." Wade's gray eyes held hers. "I can reach out to some of my old contacts. People who knew me before Blackwood's lies. They might be willing to put pressure on the district attorney, maybe even get state investigators involved." "And what's that going to cost?" "They'll want to know why I'm asking, which means revealing I'm alive, which means Blackwood will find out." "And that's bad because?" Wade's expression went hard. "Because he spent a lot of money and effort making sure I disappeared. If he knows I'm back, he'll come after me. And anyone associated with me." Martha stood up slowly. "We should go. This is more complicated than we thought." "No." Clara didn't look away from Wade. "You stay. We're all in this together now, whether we like it or not." She turned to the others. "Grady's not working alone. Men like him never are. If Blackwood's involved somehow—" "He's not," Wade cut in. "Harrison doesn't know I'm here. This is all Grady." "You sure about that?" Wade hesitated, and that hesitation told Clara everything. "We need to dig deeper," she said. "Find out who Grady's really working with. Who's funding these land grabs?" Billy shifted nervously. "How do we do that?" "The county clerk," Martha said suddenly. "The one who kept the duplicate records. If she's been documenting everything, maybe she knows who's behind it all." "Can we trust her?" Wade asked. "Don't know, but she's the only lead we've got." They spent the next hour making plans. Billy would try to approach the clerk quietly, feel out whether she'd be willing to talk. Sam would keep his ears open at the feed store, listen for any gossip about Grady's backers. Martha volunteered to talk to other families who'd lost land, see if they remembered any details about the sales. By the time everyone left, full dark had settled over the ranch. Clara and Wade stood on the porch, watching the stars come out. "You should have told me," Clara said. "I know. From the beginning, first night in the storm. You wouldn't have let me stay if you'd known. Maybe not, but that should have been my choice to make." Clara turned to face him. "You keep saying we're partners, but partners don't lie to each other." "I wasn't lying, I just wasn't telling you everything." "Wade," he sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry." "Are you? Or are you just sorry you got caught?" That hit home. Wade flinched like she'd slapped him. "That's not fair," he said quietly. "Fair?" Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. "You want to talk about fair? You've been living here for weeks, eating my food, sleeping in my barn, fixing my fences. The whole time you were actually some rich businessman slumming it as a drifter. How is any of that fair? I never pretended to be something I wasn't. You pretended to be broke. You pretended to be desperate. Hell, you pretended that fixing my gate was some big gesture when you probably own gates that cost more than this whole ranch. I don't own anything anymore. Blackwood took it all. But you had it once. You were powerful, connected. And you never thought to mention that?" Wade's voice rose. "Because none of it mattered. That life is over. That person is dead. I'm just Wade now, a man trying to help someone who actually deserves it." "Don't," Claire's voice went cold. "Don't you dare make this about me needing to be saved. I've been taking care of myself just fine." "Then why'd you let me stay?" "Because I was lonely." The words burst out before Clara could stop them. "Because I was so damn tired of doing everything alone that when you showed up and fixed that gate without being asked, it felt like maybe, just maybe, someone actually gave a damn whether I lived or died. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? You weren't being kind. You were testing me, seeing if I'd help a stranger, playing some game to make yourself feel better about whatever guilt you're carrying." Wade stared at her. "Is that what you think?" "I don't know what to think anymore." Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. Clara's chest hurt. She wanted to take the words back, but they were out now, hanging in the air like accusations. "I didn't come here to use you," Wade said finally. His voice was rough. "I came here because I was running. From Blackwood, from my old life, from everything. And when that storm hit, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe I'd just let the prairie take me and be done with it. But then you opened that door. You gave me shelter when you had every reason not to. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely worthless." Claire's throat tightened. "So yeah," Wade continued, "I didn't tell you everything, because I was afraid if you knew who I really was, or who I used to be, you'd see me different. Treat me like Harrison Blackwood's disgraced former partner instead of just Wade. And I couldn't stand that. Not from you." "Why not from me?" Wade met her eyes, and the raw honesty in his face made Clara's breath catch. "Because you're the first person in years who's treated me like I'm worth something. And I didn't want to lose that." The words settled between them, quiet and true. Clara felt her anger crumble. She wanted to hold on to it, needed the armor it provided. But Wade was looking at her like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting under his feet, and she couldn't pretend she didn't understand that feeling. "I need time," she said finally. Wade nodded. "I understand. And I need the whole truth, everything, no more secrets." "Okay. I mean it, Wade. One more lie, and I don't care how much money you spent on lawyers or how many times you've saved my neck, you'll be gone." "I get it. I do." Wade's voice was quiet. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. About all of it." Clara wanted to say something cutting, something that would remind him she wasn't someone to be played with. But the exhaustion in his eyes looked too much like her own. "Go get some sleep," she said instead. "Tomorrow we start figuring out who's really behind this mess." Wade hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded and headed toward the barn. Clara stood on the porch long after he was gone, staring at the stars and trying to sort through the tangle in her chest. Anger, betrayal, confusion, all of it mixed up with something she didn't want to name. She'd let Wade into her life because she was tired of being alone. But now she was learning that letting someone in meant they could hurt you in ways solitude never could. The question was whether the risk was worth it. Clara didn't have an answer. Not yet. The next 3 days passed in a blur of hard work and careful avoidance. Clara and Wade spoke only when necessary, maintaining a cold politeness that was somehow worse than fighting. Billy came back with news on the 4th day. The county clerk was willing to talk. but only in secret and only if they could guarantee her safety. Grady had threatened her family, told her if she breathed a word about the duplicate records, her husband would lose his job at the mill. They arranged a meeting at Martha's place, away from town where Grady's spies couldn't see. Clara insisted on going despite Wade's objections. "This is my fight," she said. "It's our fight." "Don't start." They rode to Martha's small farmhouse in tense silence. The clerk was already there when they arrived, a nervous woman named Elizabeth Garrett with ink-stained fingers and eyes that darted to every shadow. "Thank you for coming," Martha said, ushering everyone inside. Elizabeth perched on the edge of a chair like she might bolt at any second. "I can't stay long. If anyone sees me here—" "No one will," Clara assured her. "What can you tell us?" Elizabeth pulled a small journal from her bag. "I've been keeping copies of every transaction that came through the county office for the past 3 years. After I saw what Grady was doing, manipulating records, adding fake fees, I started documenting everything." "Why?" Wade asked. Because my father lost his farm the same way. Couldn't afford the inflated taxes, got forced out at auction. I watched it break him. He died 6 months later." Elizabeth's voice shook. "I swore I'd find a way to make it right." She opened the journal and showed them page after page of meticulous notes. Property transfers, tax assessments, auction results. Every piece of Grady's scheme laid out in careful handwriting. "This is incredible," Clara breathed. "It's not enough," Wade said. "Not by itself. We need to connect these transactions to whoever's funding Grady." "Follow the money." Elizabeth flipped to a different section. "I thought of that. Look here, every property Grady acquires at auction gets sold within 6 months, always to the same buyer." Clara leaned closer. "Who?" "A company called Frontier Holdings, based out of Houston." Wade's whole body went rigid. "Say that again?" "Frontier Holdings, why?" Wade's face had gone pale. "That's one of Harrison Blackwood's shell companies. I helped set it up years ago." The room went dead silent. "You're saying Blackwood's behind this?" Clara demanded. "I'm saying he might be, or someone using his network." Wade stood up, pacing. Blackwood's strategy was always the same. Identify valuable land, acquire it through legal but questionable means, then develop it or resell at massive profit. If he's moved into this county, then Grady's just the front man, Martha finished. Blackwood's the real power. Elizabeth looked terrified. "If Blackwood's involved, we can't fight this. He's too powerful. He'll destroy us all." "No," Clara said. "He won't, because we're going to destroy him first." Wade turned to stare at her. "Clara, you said you had contacts, people who might help, time to use them. If I reach out, Blackwood will know I'm alive within 24 hours. Good. Let him know. Let him come. Because I'm done hiding and I'm done running scared." Claire stood up and faced Wade. "You asked me once why I let you stay. It's because I recognized something in you. Someone who'd lost everything and was still fighting to find a reason to keep going. Well, I found my reason. This ranch, this land, it's all I have left of the life I built with Thomas. And I will be damned if I let Harrison Blackwood steal it the way he stole everything from you." Wade's eyes shone with something that might have been tears. "If we do this, there's no going back. Blackwood doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget." "Neither do I." Martha cleared her throat. "I hate to interrupt, but if we're really going after Blackwood, we need a plan. A real one." They spent the next 2 hours strategizing. Wade would reach out to his old contacts, specifically a few honest investors who'd been burned by Blackwood's schemes and might welcome a chance at revenge. Elizabeth would provide her documentation to Hayes, giving him ammunition for a larger case. Sam and Billy would spread word through town, rally other families who'd lost land, and Clara would be the face of it all. The widow refusing to back down, fighting not just for her own property, but for everyone Blackwood had wronged. "It's dangerous," Wade warned. "Blackwood will come after you personally. He'll use every dirty trick he knows." "Let him try." By the time they rode back to the ranch, night had fallen again. Clara's mind was racing, running through everything they'd learned and everything they still needed to do. "Thank you," Wade said quietly. Clara glanced at him. "For what?" "For believing in this. For fighting even when it'd be easier to walk away." "I'm not doing it for you." I know. You're doing it for the land, for Thomas, for yourself. Wade's voice softened. But I'm grateful anyway. Clara wanted to stay angry, wanted to keep that wall between them, but his honesty was wearing her down, chip by chip. I meant what I said before, she told him. No more secrets. No more secrets, Wade agreed. And when this is over, when we've beaten Grady and Blackwood and saved the ranch, we're going to have a long conversation about what happens next. I know. Good. Clara nudged her horse forward. Now, come on, we've got work to do. They rode the last mile in comfortable silence, and for the first time in days, Clara felt something like hope stirring in her chest. It was small and fragile and probably foolish, but it was there. And sometimes that was enough to keep fighting. Wade sent the telegram the next morning. Clara watched him write it out in careful block letters at the general store, Billy hovering nervously nearby. The message was simple and devastating. Wade Mercer alive. Need your help. HB involved. It was addressed to someone named Charles Drummond in Austin. Who's Drummond? Clara asked as Wade handed the paper to the telegraph operator. Former investor. Lost a fortune when Blackwood forced me out. If anyone wants revenge badly enough to help, it's him. The operator read the message and his eyes went wide. Wade Mercer? As in, just send it, Wade said, sliding coins across the counter. They waited outside while the message went through. Clara could feel the tension radiating off Wade, saw the way his hand kept drifting toward his gun like he expected Blackwood's men to materialize any second. How long before he responds? She asked. If he's in Austin? Few hours, maybe? Wade stared down the empty street. If he believes it's really me, why wouldn't he? Because Harrison made sure everyone thought I was either dead or a thief who'd run off to Mexico. Charles was one of the few who didn't believe the lies, but even he probably figured I was gone for good. Wade's jaw tightened. Coming back from the dead tends to raise questions. They didn't have to wait long. The response came through 90 minutes later, crackling over the telegraph wire with an urgency that made the operator fumble the transcription. Billy read it aloud. Prove it's you. What did I tell you at the Driscoll Hotel, April 1881? Wade's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. Tell him, you said I was too honest for the cattle business and it would get me killed someday. Turns out you were right. The operator sent it. Another agonizing wait, shorter this time. The response, I'll be on tomorrow's train. Don't get yourself killed before I arrive. CD. Clara felt something unclench in her chest. He believes you. Yeah, he does. Wade looked at her, and the relief in his eyes was almost painful to see. One down, about 50 more to go. Over the next 2 days, Wade sent telegrams to everyone he'd once trusted. Former business partners, honest ranchers who'd been squeezed out by Blackwood's expansion, even a few journalists who'd tried to expose the corruption and been silenced. Each message was carefully worded, revealing just enough to prove Wade was alive without giving Blackwood ammunition. And each response that came back, some cautious, some furious, some desperately hopeful, tightened the noose around Harrison Blackwood's empire a little more, but it also painted a target on Clara's ranch. The attack started on the third night. Clara woke to the smell of smoke. She was on her feet before her brain fully processed the danger, grabbing her rifle and stumbling to the window. Orange light flickered from the direction of the barn. Wade! She screamed, already running. He met her halfway across the yard, fully dressed like he'd never gone to sleep. Get water. I'll try to contain it. The barn was fully engulfed on the north side, flames climbing the old wood like they were hungry for it. Clara's chickens scattered in panicked chaos, and she could hear her horse screaming from inside. The animals! She shouted. Wade was already moving, pulling his shirt up over his mouth and nose as he ran into the smoke. Clara followed with a bucket, throwing water uselessly at flames that laughed at her efforts. Wade emerged, dragging Clara's horse by the bridle, the animal wild-eyed and fighting him. Then back in for the second horse and the milk cow, getting them all clear while the fire consumed everything else. By the time they got the animals secured in the far pasture, the barn was gone. Just a skeleton of blackened beams and ash, glowing embers drifting on the night wind like evil fireflies. Clara stood watching it burn, chest heaving, face streaked with soot, and tears she didn't remember crying. Grady? She asked. Probably, or someone working for him. Wade's voice was rough from smoke. Blackwood knows I'm back. This is his way of saying he knows where to find me. He's not trying to scare us off anymore. He's trying to destroy us. Yeah. Clara turned to look at Wade. In the firelight, his face was hard and dangerous, all traces of the quiet drifter gone. This was someone who'd fought battles before and knew how to fight dirty. What do we do? We hit back, Wade said. Harder. Charles Drummond arrived on the noon train the next day, and he was nothing like Clara expected. Short, balding, with spectacles, and the soft hands of a man who worked with ledgers instead of livestock. But when he looked at Wade, his eyes burned with the kind of rage that came from betrayal. You son of a bitch, he said. You've been alive this whole time? Not the whole time, just most of it. Do you have any idea what Harrison did after you disappeared? The lies he spread? The people he ruined using your name? I know, I'm sorry. Drummond stared at Wade for a long moment. Then he pulled him into a fierce hug. I knew you weren't a thief. I knew it. But nobody would listen. Clara watched the reunion from the porch, uncomfortable with the raw emotion. When the two men finally broke apart, Drummond turned to her. Mrs. Whitmore, Charles Drummond, Wade tells me you've been giving him shelter. Something like that. Then I owe you more than I can ever repay. This man, Drummond clapped Wade's shoulder, is one of the few honest people I've ever met in business. If he's fighting Harrison Blackwood, then so am I. They gathered in Clara's kitchen, the same table where Wade had first drunk her terrible coffee, now covered with documents and telegraph responses. Drummond had brought files, years' worth of evidence he'd been collecting on Blackwood's schemes. I never stopped investigating, he explained, spreading papers across the worn wood. After you disappeared, I knew Harrison was behind it. So I started tracking his operations, documenting everything. Look here. Frontier Holdings has been acquiring land in 6 different counties, always using the same pattern. Corrupt local officials, inflated tax assessments, forced auctions. How much land? Clara asked. Thousands of acres. Worth millions if he can consolidate it for railroad development. Wade's eyes narrowed. Railroad development? The Fort Worth and Rio Grande line. It's supposed to run through here in the next 2 years. Harrison's been positioning himself to control all the land along the proposed route. Drummond pulled out a map marked with red circles. Every property he's acquired sits right in the path, including yours, Mrs. Whitmore. Clara felt cold. So this was never about taxes. It was about the railroad. Railroad means towns. Towns mean commerce. Commerce means money. Drummond tapped the map. Harrison's planning to build a cattle empire along the entire route. He'll control the transport, the land, and the markets. It's brilliant, really, and completely ruthless. Can we stop him? Wade asked. Legally? Maybe. I've been in contact with a federal prosecutor who's interested in building a corruption case. But it'll take time, months, maybe years, and Harrison won't wait that long. Clara's hands clenched. The auction's in 2 weeks. If he takes my land, it's the last piece he needs in this county, Drummond finished. Without it, there's a gap in his holdings. With it, he controls everything from here to the Colorado River. Silence fell over the kitchen. Outside, Clara could see the charred remains of her barn through the window. Everything she'd built, burning because she happened to own land a rich man wanted. There has to be another way, she said. Wade and Drummond exchanged looks. What? Clara demanded. What aren't you telling me? Wade took a breath. There might be one option, but you're not going to like it. Try me. We go public. Full exposure. I reveal I'm alive, lay out everything Harrison did to force me out, connect it to what he's doing here. We give the story to every newspaper that'll print it, turn this into a scandal so big that even Harrison's connections can't bury it. That's perfect, Clara said. Why wouldn't I like it? Because it makes you the center of the story. The widow standing up to corrupt businessmen and politicians. You'll be famous, which means you'll be a target. Harrison will come after you with everything he has, legally, personally, maybe even physically. Your life will never be private again. Clara thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Do it. Clara! I said do it. I didn't ask to be part of this, but I am now. And if telling my story can help stop Blackwood from doing to other families what he's done to mine, then that's what we do. Drummond smiled. I like her. She's got spine. Too much spine for her own good, Wade muttered, but Clara saw the pride in his eyes. Over the next week, they built their case. Drummond's evidence, Elizabeth's duplicated records, testimonies from families who'd lost their land. Wade wrote out his own account of Blackwood's betrayal, every detail he could remember about the empire they'd built together and how Harrison had stolen it. And Clara sat for hours with a journalist named Sarah Mitchell, who'd traveled from Houston specifically for the story. Sarah had been trying to expose Blackwood for years, watching him destroy her sources and silence her witnesses. Now she had something he couldn't silence, a living, breathing victim with proof. "Tell me about your husband," Sarah said, pencil poised over her notebook. Clara talked about Thomas for the first time in years, about building the ranch together, the dreams they'd had, the life they'd planned, about losing him and learning to survive alone, about refusing to let corrupt men steal what she and Thomas had created. Sarah wrote it all down, and when she read it back, Clara barely recognized herself. In Sarah's words, she sounded brave and defiant. In reality, she was just exhausted and angry and trying not to let fear swallow her whole. "This will run in tomorrow's paper," Sarah said, "front page. And I've got contacts in Austin, San Antonio, even Dallas who'll pick it up. By the end of the week, everyone in Texas will know what Harrison Blackwood's been doing." "Will it be enough?" Sarah's expression was grim. "Honestly, I don't know. Men like Blackwood don't go down easy. But it's a start." The article hit the Houston paper first, then spread like wildfire. Within 3 days, the story was everywhere. Widow fights corrupt cattle baron, former partner returns from the dead to expose empire built on fraud. The details were sensational enough that even papers that usually ignored local land disputes couldn't resist. Clara's ranch was suddenly the center of attention. Journalists camped at the property line. Photographers tried to get shots of the ruined barn. One enterprising reporter even attempted to interview Clara's chickens. Wade handled most of them, his natural authority returning now that he wasn't hiding anymore. But he made sure Clara was visible, made sure everyone saw the woman at the center of this fight. "How do you feel about Harrison Blackwood's attempts to steal your land?" a reporter from San Antonio asked. Clara looked straight at the camera. "I feel like he picked the wrong widow to bully." The quote appeared in papers across the state, and that's when Harrison Blackwood finally showed his face. He arrived exactly 1 week before the scheduled auction, rolling into town in a private rail car with enough lawyers and bodyguards to invade a small country. Clara heard about it from Billy, who'd been watching the train station. "He's at the hotel," Billy reported, breathless from running. "Took the entire top floor. There's at least a dozen men with him, all armed." Clara looked at Wade. "He's here to finish this." "Yeah, he is." Drummond, who'd stayed at the ranch despite the danger, shook his head. "Harrison never comes himself. He always sends proxies. If he's here in person..." "He's worried," Wade finished. "The publicity's got him rattled." "Or he's planning something we haven't anticipated," Clara said. She was right. The summons came that evening, a formal invitation delivered by one of Blackwood's lawyers requesting Clara and Wade's presence at the hotel for a private discussion of mutual interests. Wade read it and his face went dark. "It's a trap." "Maybe, but we have to go." Clara was already heading for her room. "If we refuse, it looks like we're afraid of him." "We should be afraid of him. Harrison doesn't do anything without 3 backup plans." "Then we better make some plans of our own." They dressed carefully for the meeting. Clara in the black dress she'd worn to Thomas's funeral, the only formal clothing she owned. Wade in the suit he'd worn to the courthouse, transforming back into the businessman he used to be. Drummond insisted on coming as their witness. "Harrison won't try anything too illegal with 3 people present, probably." "That's not reassuring," Clara said. "It's the best I've got." They rode into town together, the evening sun turning the sky orange and purple. Clara's hands were steady on the reins, but her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd faced down storms and drought and 4 years of isolation, but Harrison Blackwood was different. He was the kind of monster that wore expensive suits and smiled while destroying you. The hotel lobby was nearly empty when they arrived, probably cleared out by Blackwood's men. A servant led them upstairs to a private dining room where Harrison Blackwood waited. He was younger than Clara expected, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of handsome face that probably got him whatever he wanted. He stood when they entered, all polished manners. "Wade, it's been a long time." Wade's voice could have cut glass. "Harrison." Blackwood's eyes moved to Clara. "And you must be Mrs. Whitmore. I've read so much about you. Please, sit." Clara remained standing. I'll stand, thanks. As you wish. Blackwood gestured to a table laden with food and wine. I thought we might discuss this situation like civilized people. There's nothing to discuss, Clara said. You tried to steal my land through fraud. We exposed you. Now you're going to lose. Blackwood smiled. Such certainty. I admire that. But I'm afraid you're operating under some misconceptions. You see, I haven't done anything illegal. Frontier Holdings is a legitimate company making legitimate land acquisitions. Through corrupt officials and fake tax assessments. Can you prove that? In court? With evidence that would hold up under scrutiny? Blackwood's smile widened. I think you'll find that all the documentation is perfectly legal. Unfortunate for the people involved, perhaps, but legal. Wade stepped forward. We have Elizabeth Garrett's records. Everything you did, documented. You have copies made by a county clerk who's already been dismissed for falsifying documents. Her testimony won't hold up. Blackwood poured himself wine, casual as discussing the weather. As for the newspapers, well, they've served their purpose. You've gotten your publicity, told your little David and Goliath story. Very inspiring, but ultimately meaningless. Clara felt cold spreading through her chest. You're not even worried. Why would I be? I've weathered bigger scandals than this. In 6 months, people will forget all about the widow who stood up to the big bad businessmen. They always do. We'll keep fighting. In court, in the papers, everywhere. And I'll keep winning, because that's what I do, Mrs. Whitmore. I win. Blackwood set down his wine glass. Which brings me to why I asked you here. I'm prepared to make you an offer. A generous one. I'm not selling. $50,000 for your property, plus another $20,000 for the emotional distress my associates may have caused. That's more than fair market value. Clara laughed. You think this is about money? Everything's about money. People just pretend otherwise to feel noble. I don't want your money. I want you gone. I want Grady in jail. I want every family you've robbed to get their land back. Blackwood's pleasant expression finally cracked. That's not going to happen. Then we have nothing to talk about. Clara turned to leave. Wade and Drummond moved to follow. Wade, Blackwood said quietly. A word. Alone. Wade stopped. Clara grabbed his arm. Don't. It's all right. Wait outside. Wade, trust me. Clara wanted to argue, but the look in Wade's eyes stopped her. She and Drummond stepped into the hallway, leaving Wade alone with the man who'd destroyed his life. The door closed. Clara pressed her ear against it, trying to hear. Blackwood's voice, too low to make out words. Then Wade's, sharp and angry. Something crashed. A glass, maybe. More voices rising and falling. Then silence. Clara was reaching for the door when it opened. Wade stepped out, his face pale but composed. What happened? She demanded. He made me an offer too. What kind of offer? The kind I'm not going to take. Wade's jaw was tight. Let's go. They made it halfway down the stairs before Blackwood's voice called out from above. Mrs. Whitmore. One more thing. Clara turned. Blackwood stood at the railing, backlit by lamplight. Your husband. Thomas, wasn't it? He died of fever, I understand. Clara's blood went cold. Don't. I merely wanted to express my condolences. Such a terrible way to go, and so quickly, just 3 days according to the records. What are you implying? Blackwood smiled. Nothing at all. Only that it's fortunate for him he died when he did, before the railroad surveys began, before his land became valuable. One might almost say the timing was convenient. Wade surged back up the stairs. You son of a... Drummond and Clara grabbed him, held him back. Blackwood's smile never wavered. I'll see you at the auction, Mrs. Whitmore. Do try to dress appropriately. They got Wade outside before he could do something that would land him in jail. He was shaking with rage, fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. He didn't touch Thomas, Clara said firmly. He's just trying to get in our heads. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Thomas died of fever. The doctor confirmed it. Blackwood's lying. But doubt had crept in, cold and poisonous. Thomas had been perfectly healthy one day, dead 3 days later. The doctor said it was fever, but doctors made mistakes. And if Blackwood had known about the railroad surveys even back then? No. Clara forced the thought away. That way led to madness. He offered me the company back, Wade said suddenly. My half of the original partnership. Full restoration of my name and reputation. All I have to do is convince you to sell the land and disappear. Clara's stomach dropped. And? Wade met her eyes. I told him to go to hell. Relief flooded through her. You could have had everything back. Not everything, not the things that matter. Wade's voice softened. He can keep the company. I don't want it anymore. Drummond cleared his throat. Hate to interrupt, but we need to move. Blackwood's not done playing games, and standing here makes us easy targets. They rode back to the ranch in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Clara's mind kept circling back to Blackwood's smile. The casual way he'd implied Thomas's death wasn't natural. It was designed to hurt her, to make her doubt everything. And it was working. Back at the ranch, Clara went straight to the box where she kept Thomas's things. Letters, photographs, the watch he'd carried. At the bottom, she found the doctor's report from his death. She read it 3 times, looking for anything suspicious. Fever. Sudden onset. Common for the season. Nothing unusual. But what if the doctor had been paid to write that? What if... Stop. Clara looked up. Wade stood in the doorway. You're doing exactly what Harrison wants. Doubting yourself, spinning in circles, too distracted to fight. What if he's right? What if Thomas was murdered? Then we'll find out, after we've saved your ranch and put Harrison in the ground where he belongs. Wade came closer. But right now we need to focus. The auction's in 6 days. That's all that matters. Clara's hands were shaking. She set down the doctor's report and pressed her palms flat against her thighs. I'm scared, Wade. I know. Not of losing the ranch, of what comes after. Even if we win, even if we somehow beat Blackwood and Grady and everyone else, what then? The railroad's still coming. Men like Blackwood will keep coming. How do I fight that forever? Wade knelt in front of her chair. You don't fight it alone. You have help now. Me, Drummond, Martha, Billy, everyone who stood up. We're in this together. For how long? Until the next crisis? Until Blackwood finds another way to destroy us? However long it takes. Clara looked at Wade, really looked at him. At some point over the past weeks, he'd stopped being a stranger, stopped being an obligation or a complication. He'd become something else entirely, something she didn't have a name for and was too afraid to examine closely. Why? She asked. Why are you still here? You could leave, start over somewhere else. Why stay and fight a battle that's not even yours? Wade's gray eyes held hers. Because it is mine. The second I knocked on your door during that storm, it became mine. And because... He stopped, struggling with words. Because you're the first person in years who made me want to stop running, who made me remember what it feels like to care about something more than survival. Clara's throat tightened. That's a lot of pressure to put on a person. I know, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't disappear when this gets harder. I won't. Promise me. Wade took her hands in his. They were rough and calloused, working hands, honest hands. I promise, whatever happens, auction, Blackwood, all of it, I'm not going anywhere. Clara wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, because the alternative, facing the next 6 days alone, was too terrifying to contemplate. Okay, she said softly. Partners. Partners? Wade agreed. Outside, night had fallen completely. Somewhere in town, Harrison Blackwood was plotting his next move. Grady was probably celebrating, thinking he'd already won. The entire county was holding its breath, waiting to see who'd be left standing when the dust settled. But inside Clara's kitchen, 2 people who'd both learned to survive alone sat together in the lamplight, hands clasped, preparing for the fight of their lives. And for the first time since Thomas died, Clara didn't feel like she was facing the world by herself. It was terrifying and comforting in equal measure. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The 5 days before the auction passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Clara barely slept, running on coffee and stubborn determination. Wade worked alongside her, coordinating with Drummond and Hayes, making sure every piece of their legal defense was airtight. On the 3rd day, Martha brought news that made Clara's blood boil. Grady had been visiting families in town, offering them money to testify against Clara, claiming she'd threatened them, forged documents, anything to discredit her story. Did anyone take the money? Clara asked. Martha shook her head. Not yet. But people are scared. Grady's promising jobs, land, security. That's hard to turn down when you've got mouths to feed. I can't compete with that. You don't have to, Wade said. We just need them to stay neutral, not help him, not hurt us. Billy arrived that evening with worse news. The federal prosecutor Drummond had contacted wasn't coming. Political pressure from someone high up had convinced him the case wasn't worth pursuing. Blackwood got to him, Drummond said, furious. Probably threatened his career, his family. That's how Harrison operates. Clara felt something crack inside her. So we're on our own. We've always been on our own, Wade said quietly. We just forgot for a minute. The night before the auction, Clara couldn't sit still. She paced the kitchen while Wade cleaned his gun at the table, the methodical click of metal on metal, the only sound besides the wind outside. You should sleep, Wade said without looking up. Can't. Try anyway. Tomorrow's going to be hard. Clara stopped pacing and looked at him. You think we're going to lose, don't you? Wade's hand stilled. I think Blackwood spent 30 years learning how to win. And we've got hope, anger, and some newspaper articles. The odds aren't great. Then why are we doing this? Because sometimes you have to fight even when you know you'll lose. Because letting men like Harrison win without a fight means they'll keep doing it to the next person, and the next. Wade finally looked up at her. And because you deserve better than to spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have saved this place if you'd just tried harder. Clara's throat tightened. Thomas would have fought too. Yeah, he would have. He would have lost, probably. But he would have fought. Wade smiled, sad and understanding. Then we're in good company. Clara crossed to the table and sat down across from Wade. Between them lay his gun, her husband's wedding ring that she still wore on a chain around her neck, and the deed to a ranch that might not be hers by tomorrow night. If we lose, she said slowly, what happens to us? What do you mean? I mean you and me. This, whatever this is, does it end with the ranch? Wade was quiet for a long moment. Do you want it to? I don't know what I want anymore. 6 weeks ago, I wanted to be left alone. Then you showed up and everything got complicated. Complicated bad. Clara thought about it. Complicated different. I got used to having you around. Used to coffee in the morning and someone to talk to at night. Used to not being the only person fighting to keep this place alive. She met his eyes. And that scares me, Wade. Because when this is over, win or lose, you might decide you're done playing farmer. You might go back to your old life or start a new one somewhere else. And I'll be alone again. Except now I'll know what I'm missing. Wade reached across the table and took her hand. I told you once I came here because I was running from everything. That was true. But somewhere along the way, I stopped running, started putting down roots, and those roots, his voice caught. They're all tangled up with yours now. I couldn't leave if I wanted to. You say that now. I mean it. Clara, I spent years believing I didn't deserve anything good after what Harrison did to me. Convinced myself I was better off alone. But you, he squeezed her hand. You reminded me what it feels like to belong somewhere, to someone. And I'm not giving that up. Not for Harrison, not for the ranch, not for anything. Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes. That's a hell of a thing to say the night before we might lose everything. It's the only time I've got to say it. They sat in silence, hands clasped across the table, while the lamp burned low and the prairie wind rattled the windows. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, for just a few hours, Clara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd found something worth more than land or money or pride. The morning of the auction dawned cold and bright. Clara dressed in the black dress again, fingers fumbling with the buttons. Wade appeared in the doorway, dressed in his suit, looking every inch the businessman he used to be. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. The courthouse square was packed. Clara had expected a crowd, but this was overwhelming. Hundreds of people crammed into the space, families who'd lost land, townspeople curious to see the showdown, journalists with their notebooks, and standing in the center of it all, like a king surveying his domain, Harrison Blackwood. He wore an expensive suit and a smile that made Clara want to hit him. Grady stood at his shoulder looking smug. Sheriff Coleman lurked nearby, hand on his gun like he expected trouble. Hayes met them at the courthouse steps. They're trying to rush the auction. Start early, finish before we can object. Can they do that? Clara demanded. Legally? No. But since when has legality stopped them? Hayes's face was grim. I've filed an emergency motion to delay based on the ongoing investigation, but the judge hasn't ruled yet. Who's the judge? Harlan Morrison. He's supposed to be honest. Supposed to be? In this county, that's the best we can hope for. They pushed through the crowd toward the courthouse entrance. People called out to Clara, some supportive, some hostile. She kept her head up and her eyes forward, Wade a solid presence at her side. Inside, the courtroom was already full. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Clara felt the weight of all those eyes on her, judging, measuring, waiting to see if she'd break. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, an older man with white hair and a face like weathered leather. He banged his gavel as Clara and Wade took their seats. This court is now in session. We're here for the matter of property auction, Clara Whitmore's ranch, failure to pay county taxes. Is the property owner present? Clara stood. I'm here, Your Honor. And you understand the nature of these proceedings? I understand someone's trying to steal my land, yes. A murmur ran through the crowd. Morrison's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Strong words, Mrs. Whitmore. Can you back them up? Hayes stood. Your Honor, we have evidence of systematic fraud in the county tax assessment process, which has no bearing on whether taxes were paid, interrupted Blackwood's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Vincent Cross. Mrs. Whitmore owes $3,000. She hasn't paid. The law is clear. The law is also clear about fraudulent fees, Hayes shot back. And we have documentation. Morrison held up a hand. Gentlemen, I've reviewed your filings, both of them, and frankly, you've both got compelling arguments. He looked at Clara. Mrs. Whitmore, have you paid the taxes as assessed? No, Your Honor, because the assessment is fraudulent. Can you prove that? We have county records showing, made by a clerk who's been fired for falsifying documents, Cross interjected. Hardly reliable. She was fired because she exposed the truth, Hayes countered. Morrison banged his gavel. Enough. Here's what's going to happen. The auction will proceed as scheduled. Clara's heart dropped, but Morrison continued. Any sale will be held pending a full investigation by state auditors into the county tax assessment procedures. If fraud is found, the sale will be voided and all parties will return to their original positions. It wasn't enough. If Blackwood bought the land, he'd tie up the investigation in appeals for years. By the time it was sorted out, Clara would be too old or too broke to fight anymore. But it was something. Your Honor, Cross said, my client objects to this delay. Your client can object all he wants. This is my courtroom. Morrison fixed Blackwood with a hard stare. I've heard the rumors about you, Mr. Blackwood, about your business practices. And while I can't prove anything today, I'm putting you on notice. If I find out you've been manipulating my county's legal system, I will come down on you so hard your grandchildren will feel it. Clear? Blackwood's smile never wavered. Crystal, Your Honor? Morrison nodded. Then let's proceed. The auction will begin in 15 minutes. Mrs. Whitmore, you have until then to come up with the tax payment or secure a buyer willing to purchase at a price that covers your debt. $3,000. Might as well be $3 million. Clara felt Wade's hand on her shoulder as they left the courtroom. Outside, the crowd had grown even larger, pressing close. What do we do? Clara asked Hayes. Hope someone bids against Blackwood. Drive the price up, make it expensive for him. Who would do that? I would. Everyone turned. Charles Drummond stood there, briefcase in hand. I've liquidated some assets. I can bid up to $5,000. Wade's eyes widened. Charles, I mean it. Harrison took everything from you, Wade, from both of us. If I can cost him money and save this woman's land at the same time, I'm doing it. Clara felt something swell in her chest. You do that for me? I'd do it for anyone standing up to Harrison Blackwood. The fact that it's you just makes it sweeter. Martha pushed through the crowd. We're pooling money. Everyone who's been hurt by Grady, by Blackwood, by the whole corrupt system, we've got maybe $2,000 between us. It's not enough to buy the land, but we can bid too. Make him work for it. Sam appeared with Billy. Feed store's got a fund. Another $500. More voices called out from the crowd. Families offering what little they had. $10 here, $50 there. People who could barely afford food putting up money to help a woman they barely knew. Clara's vision blurred. I can't ask you to do this. You're not asking, Martha said firmly. We're volunteering, because if you lose today, we all lose. But if you win, if we can prove the system can be beaten, then maybe we all have a chance. The courthouse bell rang. 15 minutes had passed. Time to fight, Wade said quietly. They filed back inside. The courtroom was stifling now, packed with bodies and tension. Clara took her seat in the front row, surrounded by people who'd become something like friends over the past weeks. The auctioneer, a county official clearly in Grady's pocket, stepped forward. We'll now begin the auction for the Whitmore property, 160 acres, buildings and improvements included. Opening bid is $3,000 to cover the tax debt. Blackwood's attorney raised his hand immediately. $3,000. We have $3,000. Do I hear $4? Drummond stood. $4,000. The crowd stirred. Blackwood glanced at Drummond, his expression hardening slightly. $5,000, Cross said. $6, Drummond countered. $7. $8. The bidding climbed fast. Each increase met with a counterbid from Drummond. Clara watched the numbers rise, her stomach churning. Even if Drummond won, she'd owe him $8,000, money she couldn't possibly repay. At $10,000, Drummond hesitated. Going once? The auctioneer called. Clara grabbed Wade's arm. This was it. They were going to lose. Then a new voice spoke from the back of the courtroom. $15,000. Every head turned. A man in an expensive suit stood there, older, distinguished, with the bearing of someone used to being listened to. Clara had never seen him before. Wade's face went white. No, it can't be. The man walked down the aisle, and Clara saw Blackwood's expression shift from confidence to confusion to something that might have been fear. Who is that? Clara whispered. Marcus Thornton, Wade breathed. He was one of our original investors, before Harrison forced him out. I thought he was dead. Thornton reached the front and turned to face Blackwood. Hello, Harrison. Surprised to see me? Blackwood's voice was tight. Marcus, I heard you'd retired. Retired? That's a polite way of saying you destroyed my reputation and drove me into hiding. Thornton's voice carried through the silent courtroom. But I've been watching you, Harrison, watching you build your empire on lies and stolen land. And when I heard what you were doing here, when I read about this widow standing up to you, I knew it was time to come out of retirement. This is a legal proceeding, Cross objected, not a personal vendetta. My bid stands, Thornton said calmly. $15,000, cash, for the Whitmore property. The auctioneer looked flustered. Do I hear 16? Blackwood leaned forward and whispered something to Cross. The attorney looked uncomfortable. 16,000, Cross said. 20,000, Thornton countered immediately. The crowd gasped. That was more than 3 times the tax debt, more than the property was worth. Blackwood's face had gone red. He stood up. This is ridiculous. The property isn't worth 20,000. Then don't bid, Thornton said pleasantly. Let me have it. 25,000, Blackwood snapped. 30. 40. 50. The numbers were insane now, far beyond anything Clara could process. Her ranch, the land she and Thomas had bought for a few $100s 30 years ago, was being fought over like it was made of gold. At 75,000, Blackwood finally stopped. His hands were shaking with rage, all pretense of calm gone. Going once? The auctioneer said weakly. Going twice? $100,000. Blackwood's voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. 100,000, and I'll pay it right now in cash to end this farce. Thornton studied him. Then, incredibly, he smiled. You know what, Harrison? You can have it. Clara's heart stopped. What? Wade said. Thornton turned to Clara. Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize. I can't match that bid. Everything Clara had fought for, everyone who'd stood with her, it was all crumbling. Blackwood had won after all. Then Thornton continued, However, I would like to make you a different offer. I'll pay your tax debt, the real amount, not the fraudulent one. And in exchange, I'd like to purchase a 10% stake in your ranch as a business partner. Clara stared at him. What? The railroad's coming through here. Your land will be worth a fortune in a few years. I'd like to invest in it, with you maintaining full control, of course. Equal partnership. You keep your ranch, and we split any profits from future development. Blackwood shot to his feet. That's not how this works. The auction? The auction is for the property sale to cover debt, Thornton said calmly. But if Mrs. Whitmore pays her debt before the sale is finalized, there's no need for an auction at all. He looked at Judge Morrison. Isn't that correct, Your Honor? Morrison was trying not to smile. That is the letter of the law, yes. Thornton pulled out a bank draft and handed it to Hayes. $3,000. The original tax amount before all those fraudulent fees. I believe that settles Mrs. Whitmore's debt. The courtroom exploded. People shouting, reporters scribbling furiously, Blackwood screaming at his attorney. Morrison banged his gavel so hard it cracked. Order! I will have order! It took 10 minutes to calm everyone down. When the chaos finally settled, Morrison reviewed the bank draft and nodded. The debt is paid. The auction is hereby canceled. He looked at Blackwood. Unless you'd like to make Mrs. Whitmore an offer for her property. I'm sure she'd consider a reasonable bid. Say, $100,000? Blackwood's face was purple. He turned and stormed out, his attorneys scrambling after him. Clara sat in stunned silence as the courtroom erupted in cheers. Wade pulled her to her feet, and suddenly she was surrounded by people hugging her, congratulating her, crying with relief. You did it, Martha said, tears streaming down her face. You actually did it. I didn't do anything, Clara said, dazed. Thornton came because of you, Thornton said, appearing at her elbow. Because you stood up when it would have been easier to fold. Because you gave people hope. He extended his hand. Marcus Thornton. It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Whitmore. Clara shook his hand, still trying to process. Why? Why help me? Because Harrison Blackwood destroyed my life the same way he tried to destroy Wade's. Took my company, my reputation, everything. I've spent years looking for a way to hurt him back. Thornton's eyes were hard. And you gave me the perfect opportunity. By saving your ranch, I've cost him millions in lost railroad profits. That's worth every penny. But the partnership is real. I meant every word. Your land is valuable, and I'd like to invest in it. But only if you agree. Only if you maintain control. Thornton glanced at Wade. Your friend there can explain the details. We have history. Wade looked overwhelmed. Marcus, I thought Harrison had destroyed me? He tried, but I'm harder to kill than he thought. Thornton clapped Wade's shoulder. We'll talk later. Right now, I believe this lady has a ranch to get back to. They spilled out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. The crowd had grown even larger, people cheering and celebrating like Clara had won something more than just her land. Maybe she had. Sarah Mitchell pushed through with her camera. Mrs. Whitmore, how does it feel to beat Harrison Blackwood? Clara looked at the faces around her. Wade, Drummond, Martha, Billy, Sam, Elizabeth, Hayes, and a dozen others who'd risked everything to help her. People who'd become family without her even noticing. It feels like I didn't do it alone, Clara said. And that's the whole point, isn't it? Blackwood thought he could bully one widow because I'd be too weak to fight back. But I wasn't alone. None of us are, as long as we stand together. The quote made the papers the next day. The aftermath unfolded slowly over the following weeks. State auditors arrived and confirmed Elizabeth's documentation. Every bit of fraud, every inflated fee, every corrupt deal. Grady was arrested, along with 3 county officials. The district attorney, suddenly very interested in making a name for himself, filed charges against Frontier Holdings. Harrison Blackwood disappeared before he could be arrested, fleeing to Mexico or Europe, depending on who you asked. His empire crumbled without him there to hold it together, investors pulling out and properties being seized. The families who'd lost land started getting it back. It was a slow process, tangled in legal paperwork, but it was happening. And through it all, Clara's ranch became a symbol, proof that the system could be beaten, that justice was possible if you fought hard enough. But for Clara, the real change was quieter. 2 months after the auction, she stood with Wade in what used to be her barn. They'd rebuilt it over the summer, stronger and bigger than before. Wade had insisted on paying for most of it. Apparently Marcus Thornton had given him a job managing some of his legitimate business interests, with a salary that made Clara's head spin. You don't have to stay, you know, Clara said, watching Wade measure boards for the new loft. You've got your life back, your reputation restored. You could go anywhere. Wade set down his tape measure. We've had this conversation. I know, But I mean it. I don't want you staying out of obligation. Is that what you think this is? Obligation? I don't know what to think anymore. Wade crossed to where she stood and took her hands. Clara Whitmore, I have spent the past 4 months fighting alongside you, building with you, learning what it means to actually belong somewhere. And yeah, I could leave. I could go back to the business world, make money, rebuild the empire Harrison stole. But you know what? What? I don't want that life anymore. I want this one. The one where I wake up before dawn to fix fences and argue with you about whether your coffee's too strong and watch the sun come up over land that actually means something. Wade's voice softened. I want the life where I'm your partner. In the ranch, in whatever comes next. In everything. Clara's throat tightened. That's a big commitment. I know. I'm not easy to live with. I'm stubborn and difficult, and I don't trust easily. I noticed. And I still miss Thomas. I probably always will. I know that too. I'm not trying to replace him. Wade squeezed her hands. I'm just asking if there's room for something new, something different. Clara looked at this man who'd stumbled into her life during a storm and somehow become essential to it, who'd stood with her when it would have been easier to run, who'd chosen her ranch, her fight, her life over everything he'd lost. Yeah, she said quietly. There's room. Wade's smile lit up his whole face. He pulled her close and kissed her, soft and careful, like he was afraid she'd change her mind. Clara kissed him back, and for the first time in 4 years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to look forward to. 6 months later, Clara stood in her kitchen making terrible coffee while Wade built a fire in the stove. It was early spring, the prairie coming back to life after a mild winter. Marcus Thornton's partnership had been better than promised. He'd brought in modern equipment, helped Clara expand her cattle operation, and was already negotiating with the railroad for fair prices on land leases. The ranch was thriving in ways Clara had never imagined possible. But more than that, she was thriving. Wade had moved into the house properly now, his things mixed with hers in a way that felt right. They'd gotten married quietly last month, just a simple ceremony with Martha and Drummond as witnesses. No fuss, no spectacle. Just two people choosing to build a life together. Coffee's ready? Clara called. Wade came in from outside, bringing cold air and the smell of prairie grass. Is it actually coffee, or are you trying to poison me again? Drink it and find out. He did, and grimaced. Still terrible. You're still drinking it. Yeah, well, I've gotten used to it. Wade set down the cup and pulled Clara close. Just like I've gotten used to you. Romantic. I try. They stood together in the warm kitchen while the sun rose outside, and Clara thought about everything that had led here. The storm that brought Wade to her door, the fight to save her land, the people who'd stood with them when it mattered most. She'd learned something important over the past year, that strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about knowing when to accept help. That trust was a risk worth taking, that sometimes the people who showed up in your darkest moments were the ones meant to stay for the light. Thomas would have liked Wade, she thought, would have appreciated his stubbornness, his loyalty, the way he'd fought for this ranch like it was his own, and maybe it was now. Not because he'd bought it or earned it through grand gestures, but because he'd chosen it, chosen her, chosen this life over everything else he could have had. What are you thinking? Wade asked. Clara smiled. That I'm glad you didn't die in that storm. Me too. And that we've got a lot of work to do today. Always do. They finished their coffee and headed outside together. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, full of possibilities. There would be more fights ahead, more challenges, more storms to weather. That was the nature of life on the frontier. But Clara wasn't afraid anymore. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that the strongest thing you can build isn't walls to keep the world out. It's bridges that let the right people in. And with those people beside you, you can survive anything. Even Harrison Blackwood, even loneliness, even yourself. The ranch that had once felt like a burden now felt like a promise, not just of land or legacy, but of what could be built when people chose to stand together instead of alone. Clara and Wade worked side by side through the morning, repairing fences and tending cattle, the rhythm of partnership that had become as natural as breathing. And when they finally stopped for lunch, sitting on the porch with the prairie wind in their faces, Clara realized something. She was happy. Not the shallow contentment of avoiding pain, but the deep satisfaction of having fought for something and won, of having been broken and healing anyway, of having been alone and choosing connection despite the risk. "Thank you," she said suddenly. Wade looked at her. "For what?" "For knocking on my door, for staying, for everything. I should be thanking you. You saved my life that night. We saved each other." Wade considered that. "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun track across the sky, and Clara thought about all the widows and drifters and lost souls fighting their own battles across the frontier. Thought about how many of them were facing their storms alone because they'd forgotten how to ask for help, or been taught that strength meant suffering in silence. She hoped they'd learn what she'd learned, that letting someone in didn't make you weak, it made you human, that the bravest thing you could do was trust again after you'd been hurt, that sometimes the stranger in the storm turned out to be exactly who you needed, and that ranches, like hearts, weren't meant to be kept locked up and protected from everything that might hurt them. They were meant to be lived on, worked on, shared with people who made them better than they could ever be alone. The prairie wind carried the smell of rain, another storm coming, probably by evening, but this time Clara wasn't facing it alone, and that made all the difference.